This is an addendum to the part 5, 6, and 7 videos on the top, bottom, and sides for the acoustic guitar. I'm going to walk you through the steps necessary to fix an issue where the radius top and the radius bottom are not extruding perpendicular to the sides. One of my subscribers brought to my attention that the top and the bottom of the body on the acoustic guitar, when we use the thicken command to extrude to create a solid body from the surface, it didn't extrude in a way to line up with the body. The body is perfectly vertical, but because the top and the bottom are at angles, when the thicken command thickened them, it thickened them at that angle, and the result is this. I'll zoom in so you can see. I drew a line here. I made a sketch and drew a line to demonstrate. Now this effect is very, very small, but it is there. This is about 15 thousandths of an inch, this gap that you see in here. I'll get even closer. But you can see that it is there. In practical terms, would that make a big difference? Probably not. You'd sand that out in about 5 seconds. You know, you're going to be sanding this whole outside anyway, but we're not going to use that as an excuse. We're going to fix this and make it so it fits perfectly. It's even more dramatic on the bottom. So let me show you that as well. So this is what you get on the bottom, is this. Because the bottom is at a steeper angle, it is extruded at a steeper angle, and you get this kind of goofiness. And this is the side that is 15 thousandths. So with that said, let's go fix it. It involves having to modify the top and the bottom models, and then adapting the sides to those new tops and bottoms. So we'll get started with the top first. So this is going to be an addendum to parts 5, 6, and 7, which are creating the top, the bottom, and the body. Well, the sides and the body. At a later date, I'm going to create new part 5, 6, and 7 videos independently. But for now, this is an addendum that is going to start from where we make the changes in each one of these models, and just cover the new functionality that will fix this issue. So starting with the top, if we go along our timeline here to this, down here there's a surface delete face command on the timeline. We are going to start from there. As a note, before I do that, let's move the timeline back out here. And I just want to say that while I was in here, I did a few things too. So you're going to see some differences here in terms of I deleted sketch 9, which was a unnecessary file. It didn't serve a purpose. So you'll see that there is no sketch 9, but you'll see there's all the sketches have been named according to the functionality they provide, as have been the bodies. So all of the bodies have an appropriate name for what the body represents. So now back to this. So first thing that I did was, instead of doing a thicken of the surface body, instead I did an extrude of the shape. So turn off that surface body. I still created the surface body because we're still going to need it to use as a cutting tool, essentially. But instead I did an extrude of the profile from the shapes sketch. I did that in 2 directions, just arbitrarily a 1/2 inch in each direction, and created a body to cut from. So the top is already on a horizontal plane, so it's not as dramatically affected by this as the bottom is, but we're going to redraw it anyway because it is off just a little bit. Because of the radius that we cut into the top, it doesn't end up being a perfectly flat surface. So after we extrude this body, then we're going to cut a split body, and our body to split is going to be the extrusion that we created, and the cutting tool will be the top surface that we created with the sweep command. So once we've cut that, you cut it here, and we'll turn off the body on the top, and then we still have the bottom. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an offset from the top surface and create a bottom surface, and then we're going to do a split body on that. And the body to split is going to be the remaining portion of the extrusion, and the splitting tool will be that new bottom surface that we created. And then when we do that, we can turn off the other part of that body that's left, and what we're left with now is our top. So I'm going to turn off then these cutting tools for now. We don't need those. And then I'm going to create a sketch, and I won't go over all of this. This is in the original video of creating all of the drawings for the purflins and the rosette and the sound hole and the binding. Next thing I'm going to do is create the purflin and the binding. So now, since we didn't do this with surface bodies, we're going to go, and it's no longer on that same shape. Now, because we extruded it, these edges are straight up and down. They're no longer at the angle of the radius top. They're just a straight up extrusion from the profile. So these edges are perfectly horizontal, or vertical rather. So the next thing I do is I created a cut extrusion to cut out the sound hole. And then I created a surface extrusion off of the sketch that we made. Let's turn off these other sketches. We're doing this stuff in here, the purflin and the rosette. So I chose those 6 lines that define the purflin and the rosette, and created surface bodies to use as a cutting tool. Then I use a split body to cut those, so that now they are all I've created a separate body for each one of those pieces. Next thing I'm going to do is delete those faces for the rosette and the 2 purflins, and that'll just leave a surface at the bottom of the bottom of the top. Sounds weird, I suppose. Then I'm gonna do a thicken on those surfaces to half the thickness of my top. So thickness divided by 2. In this case, it was a minus to get it to extrude in the up position. Later, I'm going to do a combine to combine those surfaces with the bottom because they are solid, and then that will just leave these holes to which I can now create the purflin and the rosette. So next, I'm going to create surfaces on top of those bodies. So now I've created surfaces on those bodies. 1, 2, 3. Let's turn those on. You can see those surfaces, and then I'm going to thicken those surfaces to the top of the top. The wording's getting a little weird here. Okay, and I've applied appearances to these to show them. But what we now have is 3 bodies there, and then we have 6 bodies underneath. So I'm going to take those 6 bodies now, minus these. I'll turn these off, and we're left. So I want to combine everything that's here without those perfluent into a single body. So I'm going to do a combine, and that combine all of those. Then I'm going to turn off all of those surfaces and get them out of my sight. And now this is all one solid body, and I can turn back on my rosette and my perfluents. This is all very similar to what we did in the first video, but because of the way we created this with a solid extrude instead of a thicken, they've just changed a bit. So that's why I'm running through all this again. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a extruded cut using my sketch. Let's see, let's get my binding sketch. I'm going to turn off the body so you can see what I chose. So for my cutting tool, I created these. I chose those 2 inside lines from that sketch in order to cut through the body. And so that gave me essentially this. So what I did was I cut out that strip in between. What I've done is create 2 surface bodies with this surface extrude on the side of the top and the inside of the remaining piece that will become the binding. So hopefully you can see that there's 2 surface bodies on those inside edges. So next what I'm going to do is use those to split the top surface. So I'm going to do a split face, and what I did was I split that top surface. Turn off the top solid for a minute so you can see that, and the so now what I have is I have 3 surfaces here. There's the one that constitutes the main part of the top, one that constitutes the perfluent, and one that constitutes the binding. Okay, and then I'm going to delete those cutting tools, the ones that were on the inside faces of the top and the binding. So those are gone. And then I'm going to thicken those 2 outside ones. First I'm going to thicken the perfluent one. So you can see that I've thickened that to create a perfluent, and then I'm going to thicken the outside one to create a binding. The perfluent I did to the thickness of my top, and the binding I did to twice the thickness of my top. And that should make sense. So then I'm going to turn off all of those surfaces, and I'm left with, where's my top? There it is. So there's my completed top, except the last thing I have to do is cut out my slot for my tenon from the neck tenon. So this is exactly the same as it was in the original video. I'm going to create a patch on this sketch. So I've created a patch here using that the sketch. The sketch is this binding perfluent rosette sound hole sketch, and then I'm going to use that patch, that surface that's created from that, to do a thicken cut. I'm going to use the thicken command as a cut and cut that out. And we turn off the sketches, and there's our completed top. Now that we've completed the top, we can move on to the bottom, which is going to follow a very similar progression, with the exception of that we don't have a rosette. On this particular design, I don't have a binding, a purfling on the bottom either. So all I have to do is create a binding and the radius bottom. So again, we're going to start in the same place where we deleted those excess pieces around the edge of the radius bottom, and just like before, we're going to do an extrude. Let me back up and notate here again. I did some naming and cleaning up over here. So one thing I did do was sketch 7 up here was redundant. We already brought in the shape sketch from the top through a derive down here. And for whatever reason, I projected that onto a new sketch originally, and that was unnecessary. I already had it here. I didn't need to project it. I'm only using that for in order to extrude this body. So I'm using that shape, that profile, and I'm going to extrude it to create this body. And if we take a look at that, I just extruded in both directions, and it's in half. Never mind, I only extruded in one direction. That's all I needed to do on this one. So I extruded that up 1.5 inches, and then I did a split body using the bottom cutting tool, bottom cutting surface, and the bottom cutting surface is we created with the sweep command. So that is that surface that we created when we swept the radius surface. So I'm going to use that to cut, and then I'm going to delete that body. So it cut this body in two. I'm going to hide the bottom one. I still got the top one. I'm going to cut that. So the next thing I'm going to do is create an offset from the bottom cutting surface to create a middle cutting surface, and that'll make sense in a minute. Then I'm going to use that to split, and then turn off that part, and now I have my radius solid bottom. So then the next thing I'm going to do is create another offset to create my top cutting surface. I'm sorry, first I'm going to create my binding cutting surface. What I'm doing here is creating an offset from the outside edge of my body. So let's turn off that bottom cutting surface and turn on our bottom, and then I'm going to create an offset from this outside edge. I'll get it open here, and I'm going to take that in 1/10 of an inch, the width of my binding. And so now I have that, and I'm going to use that that's called my binding cutting surface. And so I'm going to do a split body using that tool. And that'll cut away this outside edge so now I'll create a binding in that space instead. So I will turn off that cutting tool, get back to my top, and the piece I cut away is that right there. So that's gone, and now I'm going to create a sketch for my binding, and that's just going to be an offset from the dreadnought shape from the shape sketch. I projected in that and then did an offset inside for 1/10 of an inch. So that gives me now this profile here that I can extrude to make my binding. So I'm going to do a solid extrude. That's the wrong one. Here, yeah. I did a solid extrude again for 1.5 inches up, And now, just like I cut the top, I'm going to cut the binding in the same way. So now I'm going to do a offset to create my top cutting surface. So that's this one. And that's twice thickness because my binding is twice as thick as my top. And I'll have my bottom cutting surface down here. So on the bottom and on the top. And then we're going to do a split body command, which will use both of those surfaces to cut the binding. And then we'll turn off those excess bodies. And we're left with, and turn off the cutting tools. And so there's our binding. And then we can go turn back on our bottom. And that's our completed bottom. Last thing I did in here, and I didn't mention that in the top video either, is that this last little group is just I went through and deleted or did a remove command on any bodies in here that were just extraneous bodies so that they weren't in the model. And that's the bottom, so let's move on to the sides now. For the sides, we only have a couple things we need to do. Of course, because I was already in here, I went ahead and did something I didn't do in the original video, and that is named all of my bodies and named all of my sketches. The main thing in here is that we'll need to realign things because we changed everything. These will no longer be in the same position they were. So what you need to do is you need to back the timeline up to before the extrude and before that position command, and then position these the same way that we did before. So we need to turn on that the two sketches for our position guides. The top one is already going to come in. If not, you'll have to position it, but it should already come in lined up with those 2 points on each end, the north and the south position points. And then for the bottom, at least on mine, it comes in upside down. So I'm going to go get, I'm going to do a move. I'm going to choose components and select the bottom and rotate it 180 degrees to get it right side up. And I'm going to drag it down and do a point-to-point move and select the let's see, I want the bottom point here on the bottom edge of it and line that up with the point on the position guide, and both sides should line up automatically because we set it up that way. When we drew the bottom, we made sure we created it in this angle already, and these position guides here show that it is lined up properly. Then once that's done, you need to step back through the timeline. Actually, after you've done that, you'll want to do a new capture. So if you had a capture on your timeline, delete it, and then once you've positioned those, then you're going to capture that position up here on your timeline. You'll when you do that move command, you'll have a, here, let me just back up and show that. So I'm going to go through the whole move thing again. We'll get the move command, do a free move, select components. We're going to choose the dreadnought bottom, rotate it 180 degrees to get it right side up. Oops, what am I doing here? I'm going to drag it down below. Then I'm going to go to a point-to-point move and move that bottom point on the end to there. And if I rotate this around, make sure everything is lined up right. This vertical line should be right on the center, and it should be lined up with the bottom, and that looks good. I click OK. Now I have a position, a capture position icon up here on my menu. I want to choose that and capture my position. after that, we're just going to step through each of these, and don't just, you have to back the timeline up so that it recalculates this and step through them. Nothing needs to change from the original model. We're just going to step down through to the end. And here again, I added a little group at the end that deletes any bodies up here that were extraneous, so they're not cluttering up my browser tree. And I put them in a group so I can minimize them. But now, if we look at this, let's turn off those sketches, zoom in here, look at the front, and we have a perfectly straight line up and down here now. So that should take care of the problem. As for the body component is really kind of extraneous. We've already created the body here in sides. So if you want to do a body, you're basically just going to go do the same thing. Here, I'll just go ahead and bring it up. Dreadnought body. And so there's really nothing on the thing. You're just going to reposition the top and the bottom and do a capture position. And then if you, well, it probably makes sense to go ahead in here and do as-built joints. So grab an as-built joint, grab the top, grab the side, say OK, do another as-built joint, grab the bottom, and grab the body, and say OK. And now they're locked in place and they can't move independently. And that's kind of it, I think. So I will do new videos for the top and the bottom and the sides at some point in the future, but hopefully this addendum will help get you where you want to be. Well, that's it for this little fix to that little problem. I hope this helps you make better models, and we'll see you on the next one.